So let's look at what the Bible says here. If everybody will turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 23. We're going to continue our series through David. We're going to conclude our first half of it today. We're picking up Mother's Day next week, and then we'll move on to another short series, and then probably in the fall we'll pick this back up again. So we're going to pick up kind of the first half of David's life and what's been going on. So again, to give you a reminder, David has fled from Saul. The first time he fled, he didn't do it the right way. He lied, he cheated, he went to the wrong place, he went to God's enemies. And then there was a cost that we saw last week. Right? All the priests that he lied to, Saul killed. Now, was that David's fault directly? No, obviously Saul had the agency not to kill a whole bunch of priests. But when David was confronted, he didn't say, "Oh, don't look at me. No, that's not my fault. That's all Saul's fault." He said, "I should have known better. I will own that debt." And the one survivor, the son of the priest, he says, "I will take care of you. I will bring you into my people." And so who was his people at that time? It says there was the debtors, the destitute, the broken, the distressed in spirit. Again, this is like the B team. This was not the Spartan 300. Right? These guys were like, "I can't even afford a sword, but I'm going to follow David." And David said, "I'll take you." It says he became commander and general over them, and they became David's army. No one was spurned in the life of David. And so here we're picking up. He has these soldiers. His family has greeted him. Been there for the first time since we started the book of 1 Samuel. They finally showed up. And so he had left them with the king of Moab. And that's what we're picking up here in verse 1 of chapter 23. Now they told David, "Behold, the Philistines are fighting in Keilah, and they're robbing the threshing floors." Therefore David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I attack these Philistines?" And the Lord said to David, "Go and attack the Philistines, save Keilah." But David's men said to him, "Behold, we're afraid to be here in Judah. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines?" And David inquired of the Lord again. And the Lord answered him, and he said, "Arise, go to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hand." And David and his men went to Keilah, and they fought the Philistines. They brought away their livestock. They struck them with a great blow. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. So let's see what's happening here. They're sitting up to stop. They've been in hiding. And they went. So God said, "Go back to Israel. Leave where the Philistines are. Go back. Go to Judah." So they went. Right next door to his enemy. And now they have reports that the Philistines have attacked this city named Keilah. Now, Keilah was a citadel, so that means it was a fortified place for people to flee to in times of trouble. It was also the granary of Judah. In other words, this was one of those places that you protect because as long as it could function, you can feed vast regions of people because the crops would have been within the fortifications. And you could defend them. And you could keep growing and keep going. You couldn't just walk by and burn them. In other words, if King Saul was doing his duty as king, this should be one of the prime places he had troops. But where were Saul's troops? Looking for David. Not where they should have been. Technically, right now, where are Saul's troops? They're at Nob, killing priests of God. So Saul is out of place. And so David inquires the Lord, "Do we go help?" It wasn't David's problem, right? David was not king of Israel. His army was not Israel's army. This was an army that God gave him, and he was just waiting for the Lord to move. And so what does he do this time? He takes nothing on his own. He inquires the Lord first. He says, "Do I go help?" He says, "God, I need you to show me where to go." Now, I know this seems small. This seems like something we should all talk about. But let's really think about that for a second. We saw what happened when David said, "I got this." He did not have this. It was bad. And we're going to see that happen later in David's life as well. But he learned his lesson. Right? After he saw what happened in Nob and he was in the Philistines, had to act like a crazy person, he didn't do it again. This is what repentance looks like. We're going to see David fall a lot. David's already failed once, but he's not doing the same thing again. Once God said, "You're in the wrong here." Once he had conviction in his spirit, he said, "I'm done. I'm going to turn from whatever that was. Lord, I'm giving it to you, and I'm not going to do that again. That's what repentance looks like. So now he's seeking the Lord for these big decisions. And it's easy when you look at someone like, man, this is a great opportunity. I should take it. And I think there's a lot of us who think, man, I had this promotion and it didn't go through. God, why? Why did you block that? Why didn't you let that happen? Because if we had sought the Lord, he can see way further than you and I can. You may have had no idea what you were asking for. All it looked great up front, but the Lord was protecting you from everything in the back end you couldn't see. That's why we trust him. That's where trust comes in, is when I pray for my will to be done, I want the promotion, period. Right? I see the money, I see the position, and that's the part that matters. When I seek the Lord, I can see a little further than just those immediate things. And God can say, yes, go. Or he may say, no, that's not the one for you. Keep moving on. And that's okay. So we should consider this more, that when we're trying to make major decisions, genuinely seeking the Lord prayerfully, seeking his face to move and intervene on our behalf, to protect us from our own wants and desires. Because David wasn't about to do that again. He says, no, I'm not doing anything until God does it for me. That's literally the words he used last week. And so if you look at this, this is the prayer is the bridge between wisdom and faith. And I think sometimes in our Christian traditions, we uphold one over the other, right? No, the same spirit that gives faith is the same spirit that gives wisdom. Wisdom and faith should walk in harmony, and that's how I know the Lord's will. The minute it's all this or all that, I'm out of whack here, because that's not the same spirit saying the same thing. Faith and wisdom both come from the Holy Spirit, which means I need to be in harmony with both to know what's next. What does that mean? Why do I say it that way? When we talk about faith, that means stepping out on something that I probably would not ordinarily do, right? Doing something that is out of character. I had a friend of mine who he was kind of going through a battle of faith and was like, I'm going to show God how much faith I have. He got a flat tire. And he said, in faith, I'm going to put my mouth in that tire and I'm going to blow it up. I believe it. And he did not blow up the tire. And he blew, but that sucker did not move. And he was like, well, God, I have faith. Well, wisdom said, no, I probably don't do that. Now, there's moments where the wisdom can say, like, okay, I know this seems impractical, but God's moving. We're under counsel, folks. We're all in agreement. The Spirit in me is in agreement with the Spirit in you. And this may be crazy, but we're going to do it. Or it may be, hey, we're all in agreement, the Spirit's moving, and this seems crazy. God's asking us to be on the side of caution. Neither one of those are bad in and of themselves. It's about following what's God asking you to do. And I think you find that those both will always be in harmony when it's the will of God. The faith and the wisdom aspect. In other words, when you try to raise money for a mission trip and you don't get a penny, doesn't matter how much faith you have. The wisdom of that says you probably should not go on this mission trip. Right? You prayed for God to provide. There was no provision. Going then saying, well, it'll be all right, probably is not what the Lord's asking you to do. Right? We have to walk with those in harmony together. For me, this is difficult because I tend to err on the side, I'll be generous to myself, of wisdom. I'm just saying I'm very pragmatic, right? Very logical. I tend to always err on that side. So for to do something on the side of faith, I have to pray. Because prayer slows us down. We live in a fast-paced world where we got to make decision. And we need it now, right? When somebody calls you on the phone asking, is your property for sale? They want you to sell it to them now, right? I just hang up on them. So I solved that one real fast. But you know what I mean? Someone's literally calling, asking for your home now. That's wild. You would not have done that 100 years ago, right? You'd have insulted somebody. Prayer says, I will always slow down enough to inquire God. But also that's enough to think it through. To really go on it. It gives us a clarity. But ultimately it says, I'm going to follow God's will above my own. And I've learned how dangerous my own will really is. I used to think praying in God's will was just a way somebody prayed without faith. Right? They don't believe, so they're just praying in God's will. Now, are there some people who do that? Sure. But my reality became, no, he knows better. So Lord, I'm going to pray for this thing. But ultimately, I need your will done because it will be better than what I want. And our prayer should be that our will starts to look more and more like his. That way when I pray, I'll be getting what, quote unquote, the scripture says we want. Because it says that our prayers, our wills are overlapping. That my heart breaks for what breaks God's heart. My heart rejoices for what God's heart rejoices. And he can honor those things. So that happens. And so David seeks the Lord. God says, go. And his men say, hey, David, we don't want to go. Look, we already have an enemy that's bigger than us. We can't have a second one. Again, who knows what weapons these guys had? Right? They may have had the leftovers. All right? David has Goliath's sword. That's cool. What about everybody else? Right? They may have sticks and stones. Seriously. And they're being told to go fight an army? And like, nah, David, we can't go. And David did not chastise them. He didn't say, where's your faith? And went and he sought the Lord again. He took into consideration generously the voice of those who followed him. That is what a good leader does. A good leader is not a micromanager. A good leader is somebody who gives everyone the agency, but he has to give mission and vision and encourage you along the path. You got to make sure you complete your job. Absolutely. Right? And that, as my soccer coach used to do when I started to run cross country, which was not my thing. I hated cross country. And his thing was when I started to slow down, he was, I'm going to introduce you to the front of my bumper. Keep moving. Yeah, well, that's some kind of motivation, I guess. But it worked. You keep going. See, the leader who feels like they have to get all the glory and micromanage everything, it's got to be done just their way, is not a good leader. There has to be a freedom in it, but there has to be a mission forward. So what does David do? He goes back to God. He goes back to God and he says, okay, we're all going to pray for the Lord's will to be done. That's why when we bring up big decisions as a church, yes, we as pastors kind of get the first say and we kind of nix or we say, okay, we think this is viable or not viable. But the minute it comes to viability, we don't just hang on to it. I'm not somebody who hides anything here, right? I found out about the YMCA on Thursday. And we talked about it Thursday night even at our Bible study. Like, we're going to share this stuff with you guys as soon as we get it. Because we want everyone to pray. We want everyone to seek the face of God. And that way, if you come up to me and say, Pastor, I'm not comfortable with this, we can take that into serious consideration. And you can't do that unless you know what's going on. Now, this doesn't just apply to a church. Apply this to your family. Apply this to your workplace. Right? Praying for your people. Working with your people. And now there's going to be some people who don't want to work with you. Right? That's the reality. And there's going to be some people who get on your nerves. They tab dance on your reserve nerve. Right? They got way past the normal nerves. They're trying to drive you absolutely insane. Yeah, you got to include them too. But you take, if they're people who just contradict, take that into consideration. Like, hey, this ain't the voice of a godly thing I need to hear. But I need them to express it because they are still valuable. They're still a person. They still matter. And so no matter where we're at, we should seek to make one another better, and we do it by finding the face of God together. Because when we get to there, we can say we were all in this together. And I thank God that that's something that's been true of our church. I've talked to a lot of pastors in the last 3 years, and a lot of them are incredibly lonely. And I can honestly say I've not felt that once since this process has started. And I just want to say thank you. Because that's not true everywhere. As we shared when this church started, statistically 80% of your core group leaves you in the first year. Y'all still here. It's been 3 years in this thing. I thank God for you. Because when we said we're moving, we had all prayed. We all knew what we signed up for, and we did it together. And I think that's a powerful object lesson for the world around us. And those of you who have not been here since the beginning, we thank God for you too. You're no less valuable. You're no less of a member. You're just as important as everyone else because God brought you here. And we do this thing together. So David goes and inquires again. And God didn't say, seriously, David, I told you what to do. He said, no, arise and go. God honored that. He's like, okay, no, You did the right thing, David. Now I'm going to let you know. Tell your men it's time to go. Trust me. Ooh. Again, it's really easy to trust God when the bank account's full, the fridge is full, the cars work, the house is put together, and everybody's life is all hunky-dory, as Pastor John Gabe says. Right? What it really comes down to, do I trust God, is when I don't know how I'm going to pay for rent. I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I don't know if my health's going to be where it needs to be. But God, I trust you. And when you said you would cover the lilies of the field, you would. That you would feed the sparrows. How much more am I to you? How much more am I to you than just those things? And I think that's one of the amazing things of being a Christian that many of us in this room probably have, is where God showed up when we needed Him most. And we trusted Him. Now, if you can apply that to when things are good, life gets a lot better. That, hey, things are going well, and I'm going to trust God for every bit of this. That kind of keeps a devourer from eating all your stuff. And it's okay to say, God, are you sure? Like, that's okay sometimes. That's what David did. Are you sure we're supposed to go? God said, go. I'm going to honor the prayers. And what does it say? The Lord delivered the Philistines in the hands of David. See, David could have said, I've slayed a giant. I'm a killer of 10,000s. I've been in battle now. I got this. I got Goliath's sword. Man, I got it all. I got these men. They'll be okay. He could have said, this ain't my problem. This is Saul's problem. He can go fix it. Instead, he heard people needed intervention. People needed a Savior. And he said, I don't care what my role is. God, do I go and I help? Because that's what it says. He didn't say, do I go save them? He says, do I go help them? And God saved them. God showed up. He had these second-hand warriors who were fighting with a goodwill of weapons. And they were just fine. Against an army who was fit to conquer. Who actually had everything on their side. They had fought the citadel. They had gone into the granaries. In other words, they had the walls. They had the income. They had the army, the numbers. They had the position. But they didn't have God. So it meant nothing. If you apply that to our lives today, what the scripture says is, what is it if I gain the whole world but lose my own soul? I could have everything I ever wanted and be more miserable than people who have nothing. Because I think those are the things that bring me contentment and salvation. But it's God. And this is why walking with God is crucial. Because if David had gone out there on his own strength, and may not have said, and the Lord delivered the Philistines into his hand. It may have said, and David fought a hard battle and many died that day. Because David did it on his own. It may have said David lost and fell in battle because David did this on his own. He may have had all the faith and confidence, but it was the Lord who brought victory. Let's keep reading. So when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David and Caleb, and he had come with an ephod in his hand. So now it was that David had come to Keilah, and Saul said, God has given him to my hand. He has shut himself in and entering a town that has gates and bars. And Saul summoned the people to war to go down to Keilah and besiege David and his men. And David knew that Saul was plotting harm against him. So he said to Abiathar the priest, bring the ephod here. And David said, O Lord, the God of Israel, your servant has heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will he surrender me into his hand? And David said to his... and the Lord said, he will come down. And David said, will the men of Keilah surrender me? And the Lord said, they will surrender you. And David said to his men, who were about 600, they departed. And they went wherever they could go. So when Saul was told that David escaped Keilah, he gave up the expedition. And David remained in the strongholds in the wilderness, in the hill country, the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God did not give him into his hand. So you have Abiathar, that's the priest who escaped. He's now ruling with David. That should tell you something about who's on the right side of this battle. Right? The priest of God is not with Saul. And not only does that, he has what's called the ephod. The ephod was this plate the priests would wear. It had this very unusual thing in them called the Urim and the Thummim. Now, we don't know exactly what those were. They were the equivalent of priestly dice, basically. And so what happened is when the high priest would seek the voice of God, he would ask yes or no questions and roll the Urim and the Thummim, and it would be either yes or no. I don't know how you get that from two dice and it all works out, but hey, that's how it worked out. And they would say, God spoke. Now that sounds pretty crazy to you and I, but this was something God laid in. He said, I want the priest to have this. So Ahimelech has the vest of God. And David says, I don't want to be sure this time. I'm not just going to pray, bring the ephod here. Get the Urim and the Thummim, beseech God. And you know what that meant? All his men, I'm sure, were looking at the dice saying, what is it going to be? And when it landed, they're like, okay, all right, God spoke. Now, you and I don't have that today, right? I'm kind of thankful because I wouldn't even know what to do with them. But we have this thing called prayer, when we seek the Holy Spirit. And I think we should all have this anticipation of what's the Holy Spirit doing in my life, in your life, in the life of our church, because we're all in this together, right? No one's less valuable. No one's prayers are less effective to God because you're not a pastor. God doesn't hear me better. We were all equal in the shadow of the cross. So he says, I want my people, my house, to be a house of prayer, so that we can seek the face of God, so we can all look in anticipation of what God is going to do next. And so they sought the Lord. And he said, what were they seeking him? David says, hey, God, are the people we just rescued going to betray us? God said, yes, they are. Look, that's reality. That is life. You may give everything for somebody, and they may betray you. And it's not your fault. Now, there's times it is. Right? You knew you had no business dealing with this person the way you dealt with him, but you did it anyway. But there's going to be times when you are following God and humans say, you know what? I'm going to stab you in the back. And it's not because God wanted them to do that. And here's what's bad, is I think that's why the enemy uses so many quote-unquote church people to do that to one another. Why? Because then I reflected on the whole church. Like, not just the place I go to. No, this is how God is. This is how them Christians are. This is church people. No, it ain't. It's like two. I mean, if you're being real here, like, you may have people who said things that hurt your feelings, but man, they were praying for you. When you needed them, they were there. That was one of the realities. I was at another church. It was very traditional, and there was an elderly man there who, he would give me heck about everything. We'd fight about everything. Stuff that didn't make no sense to me. But when the truth was, when I had kids who needed to go to youth camp, not publicly, he'd walk in my office, say, how many am I sponsoring this year? Give me the number. And all those kids will go to camp. So we'd fight. And yeah, it would be hard. But there was a moment when he's like, okay, I can put that aside. And I can pour into these kids. I was like, you can be mad at me all you want. You pay for them kids. Right? As long as them babies can go to camp, I don't really care what you do to me. Right? Because you get those realities of people are imperfect. And we deal with each other imperfectly. But then there's people who are wicked, who are pretending to be Christians, who are pretending to be in church, just to be awful. I know other people who literally have been removed from business meetings for getting into a fist fight. Yeah, I don't think that's how the disciples settled their disputes. And again, I leave those things unnamed, but the reason I share that is when I see that, I don't say, oh, that's the church. I can see that and go, that person's crazy. They ain't one, nah, that's just crazy. That's not what the church is. And the prayer is the more you see the church be there in love and care. When something like that happens, you go, that ain't the church. that person just messed up. Man, that person hurt me. We need to fix it. But that ain't the church. That's not the bride of Christ. And it's hard to be there because people fail us. And quite frankly, I fail other people. I fail them back. But God never leaves us nor forsakes us. And so God says, yeah, they're going to turn you in. So David told his men, let's go. I'm sure as a soldier of David's thing, he said, whoa, what's going to happen? We went where to save who? And now they're going to betray us? I'm sure at least one soldier said, how are we going to take them out first? Like, what are we going to do? Right? The Lord's on our side. Come on. No. God said, go. Just leave. Because Saul, what did he say? Saul sees and he goes, David's in the prison. He's in the citadel. He can't run nowhere. God gave him to me. This is how deluded Saul was. He thought, God's still on my side. He was so deceived. He could not see that he was the villain in the story. He was so deceived, he could not see all the misbeliefs. And again, he had already embraced the fact that he had a demon. He became friends with it. He stopped wanting relief from it. He embraced it. And it became so deluded that he said, God is on my side. God must be there for me. Well, here's the problem with deception. This is rhetorical. I want you to think about it for a moment. If I ask, how do you know you've been deceived? Okay, think about that. The minute you've come up with an answer, you're no longer deceived. Think about that. The minute you have an answer for me, you're not deceived anymore. Deceived people don't know they're deceived. That's the point. Because the minute they wake up, they're not deceived anymore. That's why what makes all this so hard. Saul thought he was fighting on the side of good as the king of Israel. David is now just an usurper and a rebel against God's anointed. He was so deluded, he thought himself the hero. Now you have to keep in mind, that's what we're dealing with when you deal with people who fall and prey to the ideals of the enemy. They don't think they're perpetrating evil. They think it's good. And that's why it says to be careful with those who call what God calls good evil and what God calls evil good. That's how you start to learn where everybody stands in all this. And that's why deception is so powerful. Because you don't know. You think you're right. And you're fighting on the side of good. But David knew because God was with him. So he flees and they run. They go to Ziph and they obeyed. So we're going to read this long section and then we'll close. So David saw Saul had come out to seek his life. David went to Ziph at Horesh. Now Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh, and he strengthened his hand in God. And they said to him, don't fear, for the hand of Saul my father, he won't find you. And you will be king over Israel, and I'll be next to you. Saul my father knows this. And the two of them made a covenant for the Lord, and David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. Then the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah, and they said, is not David hiding among the strongholds at Horesh, on the hills of Hachilah, in the south of Jeshimon? And so now he said, O king, according to your heart's desires, come down, and our part will be to surrender him into the king's hand. And David said, and Saul said, may you be blessed for the Lord, for you've had compassion on me. Go yet make sure, and know and see the place where his foot is, that you've seen him there, for he's told me he's very cunning. See therefore and take note of all the lurking places that he hides, and come back with sure information, and I'll go. And I'll search for him among all the thousands of Judah. And they rose and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arabah, the south of Jeshimon. And Saul and his men went to seek him. And David was told, so he went down to the rock, and he lived in the wilderness of Maon. And Saul heard that, so he pursued David into the wilderness. And Saul went on to one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying away from Saul, as Saul and his men were closing in on David, and his men would capture them. Then a messenger came to Saul, saying, Hurry. Come, for the Philistines made a raid against the land. So Saul returned from pursuing David, and he went against the Philistines. So therefore that place was called the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi. So what do we see? Jonathan, the best friend, shows up. And he says, David, don't you worry. He strengthened him in the hand of God. Everyone needs someone like this in their life. This isn't someone that gives you good advice. This is someone that hears you out. This is someone who strengthens you in the Lord. They're pointing you towards God deeper and deeper. Right? And what does that mean? That means when David and Jonathan saw each other, speaking of God was the natural outcome of them just being together. Because that is what intertwined their souls, was this person of God. That whenever we're together, we are both led more and more towards Him. And we can remind each other of His promises and His goodness and His love. Because that's going to go way deeper than anything any man can say to me. That's why the church is here. So that we can strengthen one another in the hand of God. Look, we may not have a lot of overlaps as far as things we like and things we do and our ethnicities and our backgrounds and socioeconomic place or our ages. We have Christ. And we have a genuine care for one another. Which means I may not even know how to encourage you other than to strengthen you with the hand of the Lord. Because that's the one that matters most. That's what will get you through your week. And so he says, don't be afraid. God's going to fulfill His promise, David. He's telling him, look, you know the end of the story. You've already been anointed king. And God's not going to anoint you and go back on the promise. Remember what He said and live in that. He says, when you were anointed king, do you really believe God when He said it? And this is one of the things that Pastor and Jay and I, we've both been there with each other. When it's like, man, I don't even know where to go next. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know I can give you the hand of God. That we can point each other more and more towards Christ. And Jonathan says, I'll be waiting for you. I'll be right next to you. Jonathan is selfless this entire story. He's really one of the bigger heroes. We never see Jonathan fail or falter anywhere in 1 Samuel. As a matter of fact, he steps in where his father fails. He steps in to encourage David. He's stepping in to keep peace. I mean, can you imagine the place he's in where his father is literally trying to kill his brother, Jonathan's brother-in-law and best friend. And he's somehow keeping peace with both because he does have a duty to each of them. That's real friendship. Jonathan didn't live for himself, he lived for his friend. He emptied himself. That's how we show love to one another. So then there were the Ziphites. If you don't know who they are, I didn't. They're the small town in Judah who were established by the spy Caleb. Ziphites were his descendants. And so I think it's kind of interesting that they became spies for Saul. Right? Caleb was a spy, they became spies. So they go ahead of Saul and say, we found him. Go get him. Saul says this, may the Lord bless you, for you had compassion on me. So Saul not only was deceived himself, he was deceiving other people. He convinced the Ziphites they were on the side of good. And I guarantee you the Ziphites were trying to be. We kind of see this later in another story. They were trying to help the king of Israel, what God had ordained. But because of Saul's deception, so they too were deceived. So he was committing evil, convincing others it was good. That David would be the bad guy and he would be the good guy. Because he says David is cunning. That was a character smear word. That wasn't he's intelligent. No. David's going to cheat. He's going to lie. He's going to do these other things. So he started to sow discord into the Ziphites about David. Look, that's going to happen to us sometimes too. Especially when you're in the workplace. You're going to get that coworker who gets jealous. Who just doesn't like you. Not even for good reason. They just don't. And they're going to do what's called poisoning the well. Tell other people things about you that aren't true. And they go, really? So-and-so does that? They think that? Never talking to you. And they look at you a certain way now. Your conversations change and steer a different way now. That's why we pray. Only God can direct people. But if I'm a person of character, right, people know me, right? If I'm out there with everybody and everybody starts to know who I am, when somebody starts to poison the well, everyone else goes, nah, not them. I know them. I know their work ethic. I know how they stand. Sure, there's some things that aren't perfect, but I know them. And what you're saying, no, I don't buy it. But if I'm not a person of character, and I keep to myself, and I slack off, and I don't take it all seriously, what defense do I have? What could I possibly say? It's he said, she said. Because here's what the devil wants. He wants confusion, not clarity. The devil wants the heroes villains and the villains heroes. Right? He wants those whole structures turned on their heads. He wants what is evil to be good and what is good to be evil. And that includes God's people. He wants them to be the bad guys. And he wants his people in there to be good. So David left and he went to the Dead Sea. It's extremely rugged terrain out there. There's a bunch of caves, hilltops, there's flats. And in other words, it's a place where if I'm sending an army, they're going to have to divide out one way or another. They can't all go in one way. If they do, they're all going to have to start filing into a point to go up a mountain. And so David could have fought. He could have gone out. But he trusted God. So they were on one side of the mountain. If you get the picture, here's a hill. And David's men are hiding here. And Saul's men are here about to approach the hilltop. When a messenger says the Philistines are coming. If we don't leave now, they're going to take another city, another place. And so they left. God saved David. When you sit there and say, you know what, people may be poisoning the well. People may be doing all this junk to me. People may be belittling me because of who I am or what I am in my profession or my family. I'm just going to trust that God is going to be on my side. He'll make it right. I don't need to take it on my own hands. I mean, I can use the proper channels. I can tell people that matter, hey, this is wrong. But when it's done, I don't need to go and engage like they do. I can trust the Lord. That He will fight for me. And He's way better fighting for me than I am fighting for myself. And it may come in places and ways you would never dream. But that's how God works. See, if David had done it on his own, he may have been able to fight some back. But he would have been on the bottom of the hill. They would have been on the losing side. They could have been captured. They could have been proved enemies of God. But what did David do? He just trusted the Lord. And we're talking about a rock, literal rock in the hard place. Because you know what's going to be at the bottom of where David's hill was? The Dead Sea. They would have been driven literally into the ocean. But they trusted God. And I know here's what that trust looked like. If God says hide, we hide. If He says run, we run. If He says fight, we fight. But I'm not doing anything unless God has made it abundantly clear. In other words, none of those things in and of themselves are right or wrong. It was what is God doing and how do I do it? Which means God told him, go fight the Philistines. It was okay to fight. He says, run from Saul. It was okay to run. Hide. It's okay to hide. That's why we can't live in a world full of pragmatism. Because one of those would have been more pragmatic than the others. When we trust God, we're going to pick the option and we're just going to stick with it and say, this is what the Lord will do. I trust Him. Gosh, that's a hard place to be. Theoretically, this sounds easy and great. This is hard. It's unbelievably hard. Here's what I'm literally saying. When your family's finances are hanging in the balance, and you have an option that you're like, I know I can take it. I really want to take it. But I don't think the Lord's going to say yes. You let it go. And you're like, I have no idea what's next. But God said, and I trust Him. When your family's sick, when you're on the edge of a job, when your mental health is fraying, when you're filled with anxiety and pain and hardship, when I sit there and say, God, I trust you. And I'm going to stay there. Or I'm going to run, or I'm going to fight. But I'm not doing anything until you've made it clear. That's the Christian life. Jesus says, I do nothing other than what I see the Father doing. He says it multiple times. He says, apart from the Father, the Son can do nothing. My Father has been at work since the beginning, so I'm working. He says, unless God is telling me to do something, I'm not doing it. I'm not throwing myself off the temple. I'm not going to perform miracles in this town anymore. I'm not going to do this over here anymore. I'm not doing anything unless the Father makes it clear it's what I'm supposed to do. That's just like you and me. And it's hard. It's scary. But it's how we survive as people of faith. It's how we move forward as people of faith. Otherwise, you just find yourself in a place you were never meant to be. And God's sitting there going, but I'm back here. Why are you over there? You said you'd follow me. I didn't move. Why did you? Trust me. And so they trusted him. God fought for him. And one of the great things I think many of us have as believers is our testimony. Because I can look back to the day that God fought for me. But make no mistake, we did not find the Lord. We were, as it says, we were enemies of God. The gospel is so beautiful because it's God running after people running away from him. It's more powerful when you look at it in its reality that I didn't choose him. He chose me. Not because of anything I warranted. Anything I merited. I was running as fast from him to destruction as my legs would take me. But God intervened. He says, while we were sinners, he died for us. No one comes to him other than when God finds you. And I believe that God is actively working out the resurrection story of all of us for us to accept that and say, will I follow? Or is he say, I'm going to get, as it says in Romans, I'll give you the desires of your heart. And the heart that's unregenerated will always lead to destruction. So he says, God's ultimate punishment to mankind was, I'll give you what you want. That's how I'll punish you. I'll give you over to your flesh and your desires, and you can have it all. Because you didn't want me. So I'll give you what you want. But if you want me, I'll give you the desires of your heart. And that's a heart that God breathes into us. It says there's a heart that was of stone that has made flesh. No one is beyond the breath of God, the salvation of God. And it doesn't matter if I knew him once already, and I've been like the prodigal son running as fast as I can the other way. God runs and meets us when we turn around and say, I'll come back. And he rejoices. It says heaven rejoices. That's how much you matter in the grand scheme of this crazy universe. There will only ever be one of you, and God saw it to be so. It does not matter what your parents thought or tried. You don't exist because of them. You existed because God willed you to exist. And he makes no accidents. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that's when we can look at something like David and we can trust the Lord. He is trustworthy, and he proves himself that. Look, I'll be honest with you, if we had done all this stuff and prayed and God had never showed up and never done anything, trust me, 17-year-old me would not still be following God. If he had not shown up in a real way in my life, I would not be a Christian. It's too hard. It's too hard. But he's real. And will you trust him? And when you live in that trust, even when other people go, I don't know if this is right. Well, if that person's a believer, you can all come together and pray. So Pastor John Gabe's going to close this out. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here, investing in your families, investing in New Day, investing in the mission that God's called us to. I believe that the best is yet to come. And God's going to use every one of us, from the youngest of the young to the oldest of the old, to make kingdom impact in the world around us. The church is not a pastor. The church is a people. And that means every person is valuable. And you're like, I may be an introvert. Great. God didn't tell you how to be an extrovert. You may be an extrovert. Great. God didn't tell you you got to be an introvert. He said, I want you to come to me as I've made you, and I'll remake you. And you will be valuable in the kingdom of God. We just got to trust him.